I'm delighted to welcome you to the Union Hall of the Professional Staff Congress CUNY and to the 6th National Gathering of the Campaign for the Future of Higher Education. Good, 6. Welcome. We're honored to have you in our house because we have been in so many of your houses and you've been wonderful hosts. So thank you, those of you who have hosted before. And I want to say a special welcome to people who bravely came for the first time to this meeting. And anyone want to raise their hand or stand up if you're here for the first time? Any new? Yes, please welcome. We welcome you. Oh, keep your hands up for a minute. Keep your hands up for a minute. Okay, great. We welcome you. And those who have been here many times, please look around and take in who's here for the first time so that you can make sure you meet each other. I got your names, great. And there are members of our own union. There are members of our own union, the PSC, all around the room, and please call on any of us if we can do anything to make your stay better. More than a decade ago, when we, as a dissident caucus within our union, imagined how the union would be different if we were in leadership, one of our wildest dreams was to have a union hall, which our union, 25 years, a union never did, and to see that union hall filled with people from across the country working together to reclaim and remake higher education. That dream, wonderfully, has come true. But we don't stop there. But now the face of the enemy and the magnitude of the challenge have changed. It has become clear that advocates of higher education and public higher education in particular, and education for and with our students, with all our students, that we as advocates are staring right into the face of late capitalism and austerity politics. We are right up against it. And that because of that, we will need much more power to fight the current regime than we imagined. It's not a local fight, it's not a small fight, it's not a fight against a small enemy, although we all are engaged in local fights, small fights, defensive fights, and fights against small enemies. It's actually a very different kind of fight. This weekend is about understanding how that fight is lived in different places and about building the power we need if we are to do more than stick a finger in the neoliberal dike. What can we learn from different local struggles? How can they help us to understand what is at stake and what we might do to take our own fight to a new level? Because I think that's really what this is about. All of us here are fighters. We've all worked together and separately, but how do we amass the power, build the power that's needed to confront and beat the enemy we face? And that is not a simple question. This weekend is about understanding and then building the power we would need to wrest higher education away from the reform industrial complex. It is, I think, about reasserting the potential for higher education to challenge rather than reinforce racial and economic inequality. If there's any group that has a chance of doing that, it is something like the group in this room. All of us are engaged in battles against the false politics of austerity as they show up in our own places, and all of us are ready to learn from and teach each other. Let this be a weekend of building power then within our own unions and also across the sometimes delicate bridges that we've built between locals, between East and West Coast, and between job titles, ranks, and positions in this highly hierarchized industry of higher education. As campaigners for an education that is free in every sense of that word, open, rigorous, and maybe even revolutionary, we must do more, however, than stand on those bridges. We have to find a way to understand our position globally and expand the fight politically. And those are not small things. We would not be here together at all, though, if it were not for the people who gave up many, many hours to conceptualize and organize this conference. I want to give special acknowledgement and thanks to the steering committee, or I don't know if you call yourselves that so formally, but the conference call committee, the many hours on conference calls committees, Susan Meisenhelder, who couldn't be here tonight, Lillian Tays, who is here, Lillian's in the front, one of our founding members, Eileen Landy, whom you will meet shortly. Eileen is from the the United University Professions, our sister union in New York, and our own Mike Fabricant from the PSC. Sitting right there. I just want to take the privilege of the speaker of just saying personally how grateful I am to Mike for taking responsibility, for making sure that our connections happened, and then being so generous about making sure that other people in his own union and other unions had a chance to speak. Collectively, your committee did the hard work of thinking about this conference. That was the real work, I think, and then meeting bi-coastally to develop a format that we hope will be a springboard for organizing. The rest of us who were not on that committee, who are the beneficiaries of their work, let's try to live up to their vision for us. As organizers, we all know that political events, at least good ones, don't happen without many hands advancing the project in every aspect of its being. So we had Michael Lisi, Alice Sunshine, Naomi Zouderer, and Fran Clark, who gave tremendous thought to how we might communicate with each other and about the power of communication in the fight that we face. So I thank them, and several of them are here. Alice and Fran's coming, Michael, Naomi is here, there's Naomi, thank you very much. And I want to thank the terrific PSC staff, not all of whom are here right now, but they have done everything from setting up tables to assembling materials to pouring wine to putting up with the obsession about detail from the PSC officers. And that's Sue Del Giorno, Barbara Gabriel, who is here somewhere, Isabel Mercado, Ida Cheng, who is here, and Bernard Spencer. So thank you to all of them. And I want to thank you for coming. Everyone who flew here on a red eye, please stand up. So we can see how you look after your flight. All right. Bravo. Bravo. Everyone who flew across country to be here, please stand up. All right. Oh, that's impressive. Oh my God, that is impressive. And everyone who gave up time with family, students, research, and the myth of private life, please stand up. All right. It's good to be reminded, and I mean that about the myth of private life, it's good to be reminded that the cherished American notion of private life is itself an ideological construct with a history and a purpose, and that gatherings like this one are not interruptions in our lives, but actually continuation of a shared life. We're lucky to have unionists from San Francisco with us tonight. I can't wait to hear from them in their sustained and exemplary fight for the struggle of their college and the possibility of college education for working class people in their gilded city. And here we are in another gilded city, thinking about those divides. Higher education is a battlefield. I think we all know that. And public higher education right now is at the center of an intense contradiction, which is, I think, what a lot of us feel as we struggle. I mean, just this week, we have President Obama hosting a summit, as he calls it, on higher education, to which only college presidents are invited, right? Summit on higher education, and declaring that access to higher education will now be his priority issue. We could talk a lot about why he made that shift, what's happening with healthcare is the other domestic priority, but I think it's important for us to notice that that's what he's doing. And then on the other hand, Obama is also enforcing, not just putting out, but enforcing the positions that what public colleges and universities really need is not more money, is not infusion of state funds, but is to be ranked nationally on measures that include, among other things, the salaries earned by the graduates. And not only to be ranked, but to be submitted or put under the rule of more reporting, more rules, and more surveillance. That's the prescription. So on the one hand, we have this great fanfare about the enormous commitment that comes from the very chief executive in the country to increasing, expanding college access, and at the same time, the one thing that would make that possible, more investment in colleges and universities, return to state funding, is what is not happening. Why is higher education such a battlefield? Because there's so much money in it, is one answer. I don't think it's the only answer. Just as an example, $150 billion in federal student loans went out last year, $150 billion, and about $70 billion in state money, direct state money to higher education. That's a huge field of money that the profit-making sector and capitalism itself sees as now more useful to go directly to profit makers. There was a long time that capitalism felt it was more beneficial to go to the schools, but now that has shifted. So we are, I think, at this pivot of the meaning of higher education, this pivot in the sense of contradiction, which is partly what makes our position so challenging. On the one hand, we have higher education is the place where the myth of what Toni Morrison calls American innocence, the myth of American innocence, the idea that equality is possible and that this is not a country built on racism, where that myth reaches its apogee, that everyone can in fact have a chance. And it's also the mechanism increasingly for making sure that a lot of people don't have that opportunity. Higher education also has the job of normalizing inequality and enforcing inequality, normalizing inequality through its sense that, well, if you don't make it, it was your own fault. I always bear in mind Althusser's essay that I know a lot of us know about ideological state apparatuses. He talks about the function of education under capitalism. And one of the things he says is, he just flips one thing. He says that it's not that students drop out of school along the way, we can all trace that ladder. It's that they are ejected from education. And that's what's happening. At the same time that higher education promulgates this idea of the chance we all have for equality, it is also busy enforcing inequality. Neoliberalism arrived late at colleges and universities, but now it is making up for lost time, as Dan Clausen recently wrote. What do we do then in the face of that? Being right on that moment, that place of contradiction. The institution in our society right now that is most charged with giving people access to opportunity and is at the same time being desperately underfunded and also charged with making sure that in fact only a small sliver of those people actually get full opportunity. And we're right in those crosshairs. I think what we have to do is refuse to normalize inequality on this planet of slums, as Mike Davis has called it, refuse to normalize inequality. We have to be smart and unsentimental about the complex function of education under capitalism, while all the time not giving up on it, right? All the time understanding what it does, but all the same time fighting for its radical possibilities. I think we have to constantly name the source of the money. This is something CFHE has been very good about, especially in its white paper on MOOCs. And then I think we have to learn from the fact that we have already seen K-12 education go through this struggle with what others have called the reform industrial complex. We've got to learn from that. If we don't, we're really making a big mistake. So faced with this huge challenge, I think, and understanding as we must that we are not just fighting our own administrators, we are not just fighting a bad period, we are right up against neoliberalism, right up against austerity politics, right up against the biggest powers that have the biggest money, and also the biggest investment in making sure that while they pretend that we're in a world of equality, we are actually in a world of increasing, deepening inequality. What do we do in that position? I have 1 minute left, says Mike. Okay, I would say 3 things. First one is we should study. I want to go back to that. A modest but maybe radical proposal that we take on the charge of educating ourselves and our colleagues about what is really going on. I don't think many of our own colleagues and even ourselves have always been able to keep in mind the real political position we're in, this contradictory equality, inequality, celebrate, access, wonderful American access, and at the same time, shut it down. Make sure it is shut down at the same moment that you're saying it must be opened up. That's what's happening. And we're the group right there in that fight. So number 1, I think we should reconsider the idea of study groups and reading groups as part of our union practice. And maybe think of unionism as including self-education as one of our major tasks, not something you do 10 minutes on the subway on your way home. Number 2, I think we have to be honest about the magnitude of the fight and constantly be honest with ourselves and others, not be afraid that that will make us quail. And 3, I think we have to be willing to consider and invent new forms of struggle. Occupy gave us one example. The Chicago Teachers and Higher Ed Alliance for the new political party. Possibilities of Student Faculty Alliance, which I hope you're going to talk about. Possibility of a debtors movement, which might be led by students. We don't always know where the spark for those new forms is coming from and what analysis might arise, but I think it might happen, and it might even happen here. So I look forward to that work with you. We have a big task, and I think we're the right people to do it, and I'm honored to be with you. So I thank you very much, and I'd like to introduce Eileen Landy. Eileen Landy is a sister and a colleague, a unionist in New York State, a sociologist. She's been secretary of UUP for a while. She's done it brilliantly, and she's going to lead us through the rest of the evening. So thank you very much.
Now we're going to go from the sublime to the mundane. Welcome. This is very exciting. I can't believe how many new people are here. It's a wonderful thing, and soon you'll get to introduce yourselves. I thought because we have so many new people that I should explain a little bit about what the Campaign for the Future of Higher Education is. It isn't a union. It isn't an organization. It's not even an association. It is amorphous, but it has anchors. That's the only way I can think to say it. It started, there are people in this room who were there, in January of 2011, when faculty from 21 states met in Los Angeles to talk about issues that we thought faced all of us. Actually, it started before that, when Lil Tays and Susan Meisenhelder came to New York. I remember this, and we had lunch here in the financial district with our former president, and then they were on their way to you.
Yep, I remember.
And they started talking about this incredible threat to higher education that had barely been on our radar. So that was probably in September, October. In January, we went west, and we all spent an evening, a day, and a half a day talking about how we could create a voice for the faculty, and that's the broadest sense of the word faculty, that would push back and redefine all this stuff that we were hearing about how bad education was, what we needed to do to change it. And we're seeing this, that you guys were prescient. I mean, the fact that it's gone to New York has become even more ridiculous than California in this movement is pretty amazing. But the mission of this group was to create a campaign, not an organization, but a campaign. And we came up with 7 principles. We'll go through them tomorrow. But the campaign was to ensure that affordable, quality higher education is accessible to all sectors of our society in the coming decades, and to ensure that faculty, students, and their communities, not just administrators, politicians, foundations, and think tanks, have a voice, to ensure that changes in emphasis, curriculum, pricing, structure, they all need to be good for our students and for the quality of education they receive. And I think that to the credit of the folks who've been leading this, and particularly to the way that they have manipulated the media, and I would give Susan Meisenhelder just incredible credit for putting all this together for 3 years. This campaign has legs. I mean, today, Mike Fabricant and Fred Cole were on the HuffPost Live talking about education and quality education. Many others have been speaking out there in the media. And I want to show you how we are so unorganized in the sense of all of our organizations. We're built around action and a set of principles. We function through conference calls and emails. We don't have an office. We don't have a staff. I mean, the staff is whoever's involved in whatever's going on. There is a steering committee. The steering committee is the primary decision-making body for the campaign, and it decides by consensus. And that's where the major decisions are made. And that's like things, who are allies, etc. The steering committee is composed of one representative from each organization and is appointed by that organization. And the only people who can do that are those that endorse the principles of the campaign. We have a smaller coordinating work group. In this case, there were 4 people to put this conference together. And the most of the work actually was done by Mike. We really have to thank him. And then we divvy out work in things like the think tank and papers, and we'll go through all of that tomorrow. And anybody who wants to volunteer is never turned away. It's true. because we have one principle, and that is you don't tell the steering committee what they should do. You have to do it. And that's how we get things done. And I want to talk about finances. We don't have any. None. And we function quite well. And yet, here we are. And we support those who can't afford in lots of ways. It is, and we have moved around the country. We did LA. We did Boston. We did Washington, Boston. I'm almost done. Sacramento, Columbus. Now we're here, and we'll talk more on Sunday about where we're going from here.